It began with a single unsteady step beneath the dazzling lights of a royal charity gala. 1 second, King Charles III was smiling for cameras and greeting guests with practiced confidence. The next, the future of the monarchy appeared to stumble with him. Palace aides rushed forward instantly. Security tightened around the ballroom within seconds, and whispers spread through a crowd that an emergency constitutional document naming Prince William as sole regent had already been prepared. Before we go deeper into what this could mean for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another update. For weeks, careful observers had reportedly noticed troubling signs, even if no one inside the palace dared speak openly about them. Charles continued attending engagements with the determined smile of a monarch, refusing to surrender to weakness. Yet behind that smile, insiders claimed exhaustion had begun showing more clearly. His hands reportedly seemed less steady during appearances. His pauses became longer. Palace aides stayed unusually close, not like assistants supporting a king, but like protectors guarding a fragile secret. Every movement appeared carefully controlled, every appearance shortened, every public explanation polished until it sounded calm enough for the world to accept. But that night, the calm shattered. Sources claim Charles arrived at the gala already visibly drained, though determined to fulfill his duty. He had spent decades waiting beneath Queen Elizabeth II's immense shadow, preparing for the crown he eventually inherited. Illness, according to insiders, was never going to push him away from responsibility easily. Still, even duty has limits. Witnesses reportedly noticed a sudden confusion pass across his face while greeting guests. For one brief moment, it seemed as though his words disappeared before he could grasp them again. Then came the unsteady step, then the panic, then the heavy silence that falls over a room when everyone realizes they may have just witnessed a moment history will never forget. Royal protection officers reacted first, moving with cold precision to surround the king. Senior aides rushed toward him, trying to transform fear into protocol. Medical teams were quietly brought in through secured entrances, while guests were reportedly warned not to record, speculate, or speak publicly. But when the crown itself appears to tremble, silence rarely survives for long. Within minutes, whispers spread faster than any official statement ever could. Charles had collapsed. William had been contacted. And somewhere deep inside Buckingham Palace, an emergency constitutional letter was rumored to be waiting. That alleged document changed everything because this was no ordinary medical incident. According to palace insiders, this was the nightmare scenario senior royals had quietly feared for months. A weakened king, an anxious institution, and a nation suddenly forced to wonder who was truly holding the monarchy steady. Sources claim Prince William and Princess Anne had already prepared privately for such a possibility, not out of ambition, but out of duty. They reportedly understood something others preferred not to admit. Monarchies survive through continuity, not emotion. And if Charles could no longer carry the full burden alone, someone would have to step forward before uncertainty turned into chaos. But the collapse itself, insiders suggest, was only the beginning. Because hidden some side Buckingham Palace was said to be a sealed document capable of permanently shifting the balance of royal authority. Long before Charles reportedly fell at the gala, whispers had circulated about a confidential letter stored deep within the palace red boxes. A document so sensitive that only a handful of senior royals allegedly knew it existed. And according to palace speculation, the moment Charles collapsed, that letter instantly became the most important document in Britain. Reports suggest Charles had privately reviewed constitutional contingency plans for months, not because he wanted to surrender power, but because he understood the terrifying consequences of uncertainty inside a monarchy. The institution cannot afford hesitation. It cannot appear divided. It cannot look leaderless. And as concerns surrounding his health quietly intensified behind carefully managed palace statements, the old constitutional fear reportedly returned with frightening force. What happens when the sovereign is still alive, but the burden of ruling becomes too heavy to carry alone? That was where the alleged emergency letter came in. Insiders claim it was drafted with extreme secrecy through confidential discussions involving legal advisors, constitutional experts, and trusted senior royals who understood the danger of divided authority. According to Palace Whispers, the wording was precise and uncompromising. Prince William would not simply assist the king. He would not merely represent him. In an emergency, he would reportedly become sole acting regent, fully authorized to stabilize the monarchy if Charles could no longer perform his duties. And that decision was explosive, because appointing William alone would immediately silence competing claims, conflicting factions, and rival centers of influence before they could emerge. No confusion, no divided authority, no palace insiders attempting to control events through proximity to the king. Sources suggest Princess Anne strongly supported this approach from the beginning. To her, duty was never sentimental. It was discipline, obligation, institutional survival. If the monarchy entered crisis, Anne reportedly believed there could only be one clear command structure. Not confusion, not hesitation, and certainly not courtiers whispering while history slipped through their hands. Some palace figures allegedly feared the consequences of such concentrated authority. Others feared the alternative even more. They remembered past royal crises, past fractures, moments when uncertainty weakened the institution from within. Now, with Charles visibly strained and William increasingly central to public life, the letter reportedly transformed from contingency planning into something far more unsettling. A warning. The future, insiders believed, was already moving. And perhaps the most haunting detail of all was the rumor that the document allegedly carried handwritten amendments added personally by Charles himself. Not only legal language, but the king's own revisions. As though he knew the day might eventually arrive when his body would force the decision his heart resisted making. That possibility gave the letter enormous emotional weight. It was no longer just constitutional paperwork. It became the image of a monarch quietly preparing the crown for the moment he might no longer be able to protect it himself. Part 2, rewritten. As speculation surrounding the hidden letter spread deeper through royal corridors, another troubling possibility reportedly began surfacing inside palace walls. According to insiders, Charles may have known far earlier than the public realized that his condition was becoming more serious. For weeks, royal watchers sensed something felt different. Public appearances came shorter. Speeches were delayed. Unexpected schedule changes quietly appeared without clear explanations. At first, the signs were subtle enough to dismiss. A private engagement removed from the calendar, a reception ending early, a speech noticeably shortened. Each adjustment came wrapped in the familiar palace language of caution, rest, and scheduling concerns. But those who understood royal routine reportedly knew this situation was not ordinary. The machinery surrounding Charles no longer appeared to be supporting a busy monarch. It appeared to be protecting a fragile one. According to insiders, the king had allegedly begun canceling private briefings because exhaustion was overtaking even the moments hidden from public view. Palace aides were reportedly instructed to maintain calm appearances, soften visible signs of weakness, and present strain as careful discipline. But the harder they tried to polish the surface, the more pressure built underneath. The monarchy continued projecting confidence to the nation while quietly preparing for what might happen if that confidence collapsed. That was when William's role allegedly began changing, not through dramatic declarations or ceremonial announcements, but gradually, responsibility by responsibility, a state matter here, a confidential consultation there, an increasing presence in discussions previously reserved only for Charles himself. Sources claim William understood what was happening long before anyone openly admitted it. The future was being handed to him in pieces, and every piece carried enormous weight. Princess Anne reportedly became even firmer behind the scenes during this period. While others hesitated, she organized. While courtiers whispered privately, Anne allegedly demanded clarity. To her, continuity was not symbolic. It was survival. Reports suggest senior palace staff began quietly reviewing constitutional continuity procedures in confidential meetings. Carefully chosen language disguised a frightening possibility. The king could remain alive, respected, and determined, yet no longer able to carry the full burden of monarchy safely alone. Somewhere inside that growing pressure, Catherine reportedly became William's emotional anchor. Not encouraging ambition, not pushing him toward power, but preparing him for pain. Because this was never about ambition. It was the brutal inheritance of monarchy itself. A son forced to prepare for authority while fearing for his father's health. A future queen trying to steady the next king while protecting the man behind the title. And a palace built to symbolize permanence. Suddenly, with people studying silences, reading expressions, and wondering how much longer the truth could remain hidden. Outside the palace gates, the public still saw courage. Inside, insiders whispered there was panic. But while officials struggled to preserve the image of stability, one emergency meeting at Windsor reportedly changed everything. According to palace speculation, the call came late at night. No ceremony, no public explanation, only a direct order for Prince William to return immediately to Windsor Castle. By the time his vehicle reportedly entered the gates, senior aides were already waiting with legal documents, constitutional advisors, and expressions so tense that even experienced staff members allegedly felt frightened. This was no routine briefing, no ordinary family conversation. The atmosphere reportedly felt colder, sharper, and far more urgent. William was said to arrive under heightened security with a controlled speed that signaled the palace was no longer managing rumors. It was managing crisis. Inside Windsor, the ancient machinery of monarchy had already begun moving. Princess Anne was reportedly present, calm and unsentimental as always. Prince Edward, often quieter in public life but trusted deeply during private matters, was also said to be involved. Around them stood senior officials who understood one terrifying truth. If Charles could no longer perform his duties, the monarchy could not drift even briefly without direction. Reports suggest the discussions quickly turned toward constitutional continuity, emergency authority, and the rumored Regency letter. No one wanted to say the word too loudly, but everyone understood it. Regency. Not as a distant legal theory, not as historical trivia, but as a living possibility standing in the room beside them. Then came perhaps the most emotional detail of all. Sources claim Charles briefly regained consciousness before additional medical treatment, remaining aware enough to understand the crisis he had long feared might finally be arriving. For William, insiders say that realization was devastating. Publicly, he had to remain composed. Privately, he was reportedly emotionally shaken, forced to balance the fear of a son with the duty of an heir. The monarchy demanded steadiness from him at the exact moment his heart was breaking. Catherine, according to palace whisper, remained closely involved behind the scenes, not seeking attention, not creating drama, but quietly protecting the emotional center of the family. She reportedly understood that the night was not only about Charles's health, it was about the first true test of William's future reign arriving far earlier than anyone expected. Some insiders later described the Windsor meeting as the most serious royal gathering since the final days of Queen Elizabeth II, because hidden beneath every legal document and carefully measured phrase was one terrifying question. Could Britain soon wake to a monarchy still ruled by Charles in name, but carried by William in practice? Part 3, Rewritten. As the crisis deepened, palace insiders reportedly realized this situation was no longer only about illness. It was about control, about influence, about who would shape the monarchy's future if William officially became sole regent. Publicly, the palace focused on one message above all else: stability. Charles was receiving care. The family remained united. The institution was secure. But behind that carefully controlled image, insiders described something far more intense unfolding within royal circles. Different factions were allegedly already calculating what a William Regency would mean for access, influence, and the quiet privileges that naturally surround royal power. For years, Charles had governed through his own trusted networks built on loyalty, history, and personal relationships. But William reportedly represented something different, sharper, leaner, less sentimental. Sources claim he had become increasingly determined to modernize certain palace structures, not by destroying tradition, but by eliminating the confusion and inefficiency that made the monarchy vulnerable. To some courtiers, that vision sounded disciplined and necessary. To others, it sounded like exile. Princess Anne reportedly supported William's direction with unwavering firmness. Her support, insiders claim, was strategic rather than emotional. Anne allegedly believed the monarchy could not survive another era dominated by blurred authority, private rivalries, and hesitant compromises. If William became acting regent, authority would need to move cleanly. No competing power centers, no hidden advisors manipulating influence behind the scenes. No palace factions using closeness to Charles as leverage over the future. That possibility reportedly raised difficult questions regarding Queen Camilla's circle of influence. If Charles weakened while William assumed operational authority, where would that leave Camilla's trusted advisors? Would their roles quietly diminish? Would old loyalties gradually lose relevance? According to palace insiders, these questions were rarely spoken openly, but they were reportedly felt everywhere. Every corridor carried the same silent tension. Who would still matter when William took command? Outside palace walls, public sympathy for Charles remained genuine and widespread. Many saw a monarch who had waited his entire life for the throne, only to face illness shortly after finally receiving it. But alongside that empathy came another feeling growing steadily stronger: expectations surrounding William. Increasingly, people viewed him not as an ambitious replacement, but as a necessary stabilizing figure for a fragile institution. And beside him stood Catherine, whose importance reportedly deepened with every passing day. She was no longer viewed simply as William's supportive wife. Instead, many began seeing her as the emotional center, holding the monarchy steady during uncertainty. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was reportedly described as controlled panic hidden beneath royal silence. Everyone sensed history moving forward. No one knew how openly it could be acknowledged. The monarchy was trying to appear unchanged while its internal balance shifted hour by hour. And William, standing dangerously close to real authority, was beginning to understand something deeply unsettling. This crisis would not only test his loyalty to his father, it would test his willingness to command an institution his father might no longer be able to fully protect. Yet according to insiders, the most emotional moment of the entire crisis came not from politicians, constitutional advisors, or royal officials. It came during a private exchange between William and Charles, a conversation few people were ever meant to hear about. Behind the emergency meetings and constitutional remained something painfully human. A father and son confronting the unthinkable together. Sources claim the moment was quiet and stripped entirely of ceremony. No royal performance. No grand speeches about destiny. Only silence between a king who spent his life waiting for the crown and a son now being forced toward its burden while his father was still alive. That was the cruelty of the situation. William was not inheriting responsibility after an ending. He was being pulled toward it during his father's struggle. Insiders suggest Charles spoke openly about unfinished duty, responsibility still unresolved, plans still incomplete, promises connected to his reign still waiting. After decades imagining the monarchy he hoped to shape, illness was suddenly threatening the very years he believed would define him. For William, hearing that fear reportedly carried enormous emotional weight. This was not merely constitutional transition. It was a son watching his father confront the terrifying possibility that time itself had betrayed him. And yet the crown demanded more than grief. It demanded steadiness, control, continuity. According to Palace Whispers, William felt trapped between two impossible roles: the loyal son desperately hoping for recovery, and the future king forced to prepare for command. Every word exchanged reportedly carried the same hidden question: how does a man accept power without appearing to desire it? Catherine's role during this emotional storm reportedly became crucial. Sources claim she encouraged unity over suspicion, calm over rivalry, and loyalty over division. She allegedly understood that if William stepped forward surrounded by bitterness, the monarchy would appear wounded. But if he stepped forward carrying his father rather than replacing him, Britain might see continuity instead of conflict. Princess Anne, true to her reputation, reportedly offered William a far harsher truth. According to Palace Whispers, she reminded him that duty must come before fear, not because she lacked compassion, but because she understood monarchy better than almost anyone alive. Family mattered, emotion mattered, but when the institution itself trembled, hesitation could become dangerous. Charles reportedly insisted on one thing above all else: the monarchy must remain stable, not for pride, not for personal legacy, but for the crown itself. Staff members who overheard fragments of the crisis were said to be emotionally shaken, sensing they were witnessing the quiet turning of a royal age. And while Britain anxiously waited for official answers, the palace prepared for a statement that could redefine the monarchy overnight.